Albert Fish, a name that sends shivers down the spine. He is remembered as one of the most sadistic killers in American history. His crimes were beyond comprehension. Fish's actions were not just murders, they were grotesque displays of sheer evil. His victims, often children, suffered unimaginable horrors. Fish wrote letters to the families of his victims, detailing in grotesque fashion the tortures he inflicted. This essay delves into the life of Albert Fish, from his troubled beginnings to his ghastly end, and the justice that finally caught up with him. Albert Fish was born on May 19, 1870. His real name was Hamilton Howard Fish. He came from a family with a history of mental illness. Fish was sent to an orphanage at a young age. This was where his dark tendencies began to emerge. The orphanage was a place of abuse and neglect. Fish experienced daily beatings. These beatings seemed to awaken something dark within him. He developed a fascination with pain, both inflicting it and receiving it. Despite his troubled childhood, he left the orphanage with a veneer of normalcy. But beneath that surface, the seeds of his future crimes had already been sown. Fish's descent into crime started relatively small. He began with petty thefts and minor offenses, but his fascination with pain and suffering grew. He started experimenting with self-harm, sticking needles into his body, burning himself. By the early 1900s, Fish had married and fathered 6 children. On the surface, he seemed like a normal family man, but behind closed doors his sadistic tendencies continued to grow. His wife eventually left him, taking the children with her. This abandonment pushed Fish further into madness. He started frequenting brothels where he could act out his sadistic fantasies. But these outlets were not enough. Fish began targeting the most vulnerable children. His first known attack was on a young boy in Wilmington, Delaware. Fish earned the nickname the Gray Man from his unassuming appearance, blending into society without drawing suspicion. He was often described as a frail, elderly man, seemingly harmless and gentle. But this grandfatherly facade hid a monstrous soul, capable of unimaginable horrors. One of Fish's earliest known murders was that of Francis McDonnell in 1924, a case that shocked the nation. The young boy was playing on his family's farm when Fish lured him away with promises of adventure. His body was found in the woods, brutally beaten and strangled, a sight that haunted the community. The community was shaken to its core, and the search for the killer began in earnest. Fish's next known victim was Billy Gaffney in 1927, another innocent child lost to his cruelty. The 4-year-old disappeared while playing with a friend, vanishing without a trace. Despite extensive searches and desperate efforts by the community, Billy was never found. Fish later confessed to torturing and killing the boy, revealing the depths of his depravity. The most infamous of Fish's crimes was the murder of Grace Budd, a case that would forever mark his legacy. In 1928, Fish posed as a farmer looking to hire help, deceiving the Budd family with his charm. He convinced the Budd family to let Grace accompany him to a fictional party, a ruse that led to her tragic end. Grace was never seen alive again, her disappearance leaving a void that could never be filled. Section 5. The Brooklyn Vampire Fish's Most Heinous Acts. Albert Fish's most heinous acts earned him another nickname, the Brooklyn Vampire, a title that would forever be etched in the annals of criminal history. This moniker came from his gruesome habit of cannibalism, a practice that sent shivers down the spines of everyone who heard about it. Fish confessed to eating parts of his victims, an act that shocked the nation and left an indelible mark on the collective consciousness of society. The case of Grace Budd brought Fish's cannibalistic tendencies to light, revealing the depths of his depravity. After her disappearance, Fish sent a letter to her family, a letter that would become infamous for its chilling content. The letter described in horrifying detail how he had killed and eaten parts of Grace, a revelation that was almost too much to bear. The Budd family was devastated and the public was horrified, unable to comprehend the sheer evil of Fish's actions. Fish's letter became a key piece of evidence, a crucial link that would eventually lead to his downfall. It was traced back to him, leading to his arrest and the end of his reign of terror. Fish confessed to numerous other murders, each more horrifying than the last. Each confession was more gruesome than the last, painting a picture of a man driven by unimaginable cruelty. His acts were not just about killing, they were about inflicting the maximum amount of pain and suffering, a true embodiment of evil. They were about inflicting the maximum amount of pain and suffering, a true embodiment of evil. The Brooklyn Vampire's reign of terror left a lasting scar on the nation, a dark chapter that would never be forgotten. Section 6. The Letters, Haunting Confessions. Albert Fish's letters were a window into his twisted mind. They provided a chilling account of his crimes. Fish wrote to the families of his victims, describing his acts in sickening detail. These letters were a mix of confession and gloating. The letter to the Budd family was the most infamous. In it, Fish described how he lured Grace, killed her, and ate parts of her body. The graphic nature of the letter was shocking. It was a cruel reminder of the horror Grace endured. Fish's letters were not limited to the Budds. He wrote to other families as well. Each letter was a confession of his crimes. They were written in a matter-of-fact tone, devoid of any remorse. Fish reveled in the pain he caused. These letters became crucial evidence in his capture. They provided a direct link to Fish. Section 7. The Manhunt, a nation's search for a monster. The manhunt for Albert Fish was intense. The entire nation was on edge. His crimes had captured the public's imagination. Newspapers ran stories about the Gray Man, the Brooklyn Vampire. Everyone wanted this monster caught. The break in the case came with the letter Fish sent to the Budd family. The paper it was written on had a small, peculiar logo. Investigators traced this logo back to a company. This lead brought them closer to identifying Fish. Detectives worked tirelessly. They followed every lead, interviewed countless witnesses. The pressure was immense. Families lived in fear, hoping the police would capture the killer soon. The turning point came when a janitor recognized the description of Fish from the letterhead. This led to Fish's arrest in December 1934. The nation breathed a collective sigh of relief. Section 8. The Capture, the End of the Terror. Albert Fish's capture was a moment of triumph for law enforcement. He was arrested at his rooming house. Fish did not resist. In fact, he seemed almost relieved. His demeanor was calm, eerily so, considering his crimes. The arrest brought a sense of closure to many families. But for some, the pain of losing a child was too great. The capture of Fish was not enough to heal their wounds. However, it was a necessary step towards justice. Fish's arrest was followed by intense media coverage. Newspapers detailed every aspect of his life and crimes. The public was both horrified and fascinated. In custody, Fish confessed to his crimes without hesitation. He seemed to take a perverse pleasure in recounting his acts. Section 9. The Trial Justice for the Victims. The trial of Albert Fish began in March 1935. It was one of the most sensational trials of its time. The courtroom was packed. Journalists from across the country covered the proceedings. The public wanted to see justice served. Fish's defense tried to plead insanity. They argued that no sane person could commit such heinous acts. Fish himself claimed to be driven by religious delusions. He believed he was commanded by God to torture and kill children. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. They detailed Fish's crimes, his letters, and his confessions. Witnesses testified about his strange behavior. The jury was shown the tools Fish used for his tortures. The evidence was damning. On March 22, 1935, the jury found Fish guilty. He was sentenced to death by electric chair. The verdict was met with applause. Section 10. The Execution. Albert Fish's Final Moments. Albert Fish was executed on January 16, 1936. His execution was a public event, drawing significant attention. The electric chair, known as Old Sparky, awaited him. Fish's final moments were a mix of calm and chaos. In the hours leading up to his execution, Fish remained unrepentant. He even wrote a final statement, but it was deemed too grotesque to be made public. He walked to the chair without resistance, his face displaying an unsettling serenity. The execution was swift. Fish was pronounced dead shortly after the switch was pulled. The nation breathed a sigh of relief. The monster that had haunted their nightmares was gone, but the scars he left behind remained. Fish's death brought closure to many. The families of his victims could finally begin to heal. Section 11. Legacy of Horror, Remembering the Victims. The legacy of Albert Fish is one of horror and sorrow, a dark chapter in history that continues to haunt us. His crimes shocked a nation and left a lasting scar, a wound that time has not fully healed. But amid the horror, it's important to remember the victims, those innocent souls who suffered unimaginable fates. Each one was an innocent life cut short by a monstrous act. Francis McDonnell, a young boy with dreams and hopes, Billy Gaffney, a child full of life and potential, and Grace Budd, a girl whose future was stolen. These names are etched into the tragic history of Fish's crimes, a somber reminder of the past. Their stories remind us of the real cost of evil, the human lives that were forever altered. They were children with futures ahead of them, taken too soon, their potential never realized. The impact of Fish's crimes extended beyond his victims, casting a shadow over entire communities. The families left behind were devastated, their lives shattered by the loss of their loved ones. Their pain and suffering were immeasurable, a grief that words cannot fully capture. The fear he spread affected entire communities, leaving a legacy of terror and mistrust. The legacy of his terror is a stark reminder of the fragility of innocence and the importance of vigilance. Remembering the victims is crucial, not just for honoring their lives, but for ensuring such horrors are never repeated. It honors their lives and keeps their memory alive, a testament to their existence and the love they left behind. The victims may be gone, but they are not forgotten, their stories living on as a reminder of the past.